I feel kind of a little underqualified to be talking about this next book. It's a masterpiece. It's the kind of book that you pay one of those book smart professors a good chunk of cash to talk about the little meanings and such. Look, I'm just Rossdude, all right? I don't go into like the nitty gritty. I don't go into the deeper meaning behind it. Okay? I know on this channel, Rossdude Productions, we typically cover the high literature, such as Aliens Earth Hive and Aliens Nightmare Asylum. But this time I'm doing something a little different. Or I'm covering some of that real pulpy schlock, all right? The real schlock. The schlockeroni. Schlockeroni and cheese, if you will. Are you ready? Brace yourselves. It's the Count of Monte Cristo. Oh yeah, and I may mispronounce some names and some locations. Ha! I'm only human.
First off, look at the size of this thing. Damn, boy, that's a thick-ass boy. The Count of Monte Cristo was my summer 2020 read. I have a friend who asked if I wanted to read it. I said hell yes and wandered off to a nearby bookstore to snag a copy. I accidentally purchased an abridged version. That's not how I roll. I need the full deal, so I returned that censored nonsense and picked up the Penguin Classics version. The story begins in 1815 during the first Bourbon Restoration. It centers around Edmond Dantes, a young first mate aboard the cargo ship Pharaon, out of Marseille, France. At 19 years old, things are looking up for the sailor. His employer, M. Morel, has decided to promote Edmond to captain. Also, Edmond is set to wed the beautiful Mercedes, a Catalan woman who loves him deeply. However, Edmond's success has garnered jealous eyes. The Pharaon supercargo, Danglars, along with Edmond's romantic rival, Ferdinand Mondego, plot to frame Edmond as a Bonapartist, someone loyal to the previous emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. Under the rule of King Louis Philippe I, to be a Bonapartist is a serious crime. The drunken Cauterouse, Taylor and Edmond's rather shady neighbor, is also something of an accomplice in this devious plot. Danglars forges the accusing letter while Ferdinand delivers it to the authorities, and on the day Edmond and Mercedes are to wed, right before their wedding in fact, Edmond is arrested and taken to the deputy crown prosecutor in Marseille, a man named Villefort. Villefort is a stone-cold royalist with aspirations of climbing the nobility ladder. But his father, Noiter, is a die-hard Bonapartist operating in Paris and is crucial in planning the emperor's return. Upon accusation of being a Bonapartist, Edmond had all his personal items seized. Unknown to Edmond, he was indeed in possession of a certain letter from an exiled Napoleonic general addressed to Noiter. This letter was obtained on the Pharaon's last voyage, in which she stopped at the Isle of Elba, where Napoleon is exiled. Seeing his opportunity to gain favor from the king and securing safety for his father, for he loves his father even if they are viciously opposed in politics, Villefort destroys the letter and locks Edmond in the dark dungeons of the Château d'If, a small rock of an island fortress off the coast of Marseille. There, for 14 years, Edmond is imprisoned, not knowing what became of his beloved father or his lovely fiancée. It is during this unjust punishment that Edmond meets an Italian inmate, a man known as Abbe Faria, the mad priest. Faria dug an underground tunnel from his cell to Edmond's. A scholarly man, Faria educates the ex-sailor in philosophy, history, arts, sciences, languages, and theology. He also reveals to Edmond the secret of a hidden Spada family treasure located on a tiny island called Monte Cristo. This book is epic. I don't really know how else to put it. I mean, that's basically just the introduction. It has it all: romance, conspiracy, mystery, revenge, thieves, traveling, hidden treasures, and an awesome cast of characters. Dumas writes brilliantly. Every sentence oozes with beauty and energy. And Robin Boos does a phenomenal job translating from French to English and not losing a drop of momentum. Every arc in the story has such a tremendous build-up that the payoff always feels satisfying. Dumas could have easily taken the story towards a more realistic and less romantic conclusion, but he takes a more inspirational avenue, giving the reader what they crave without being too jolly. Some of the points in the plot can come off as convenient, but I feel that this adds to the romance of it all. The travel aspect is some of the best travel fiction that I've read since reading The Historian.
And don't worry, we'll talk about The Historian later. Long story short, check it out.
It paints pictures of southern France, Paris, and Italy that makes the reader want to travel there themselves. Reading this book, I wished I had a time machine so that I could visit these places in the 1800s. It is so beautiful and excels at taking you away from your mundane life.
There's actually not a whole lot of violence in this novel, in The Count of Monte Cristo. Going into it, I had this image of kind of a swashbuckling adventure, kind of in line with The Three Musketeers, which Alexander Dumas did write that as well. And I'm not big on The Three Musketeers, but I've seen a few iterations on film, and I've also watched some stage plays in which there was some sword play. There was a little bit of sword play in there. Some swashbuckling action going on in The Three Musketeers. And there was also a Count of Monte Cristo movie in the early 2000s. I never watched it, but I saw a trailer for it, and I think they tried to advertise it kind of as this action adventure type of story, which it's not really that. Like the violence in it is more kind of secondhand. Like, you hear about it. Like, there's violence around this story. But this story does not actually provide a whole lot of violence, and there's also like steps sort of leading you to believe that, oh, there's gonna be like a final showdown, like there's gonna be some violence here. And it doesn't do that, and yet it's still satisfying.
I can't recommend it enough. The rest of the video contains spoilers. If you don't wish to be spoiled, leave this video now. Get yourself to a bookstore or a library and read the full version of this amazing epic. Hold on to your butts. This is going to be a long summary. Edmond and Faria make a plan to dig themselves out of the dungeons, but just when they plan to attempt their escape, Faria is stricken with a seizure and is paralyzed. Not wanting to leave his friend and teacher to the lonely darkness of the dungeon, Edmond stays, and their chances of escape are scrap. Faria knows his time is near, and eventually he is stricken by another seizure, this one fatal. Edmond is crushed by Faria's death, and the prospect of being alone in the dungeons is almost worse than death itself. The jailers come to assess Faria's situation, and finding him dead, put him in a body bag. They leave the corpse there for the gravediggers to attend to. It dawns on Edmond a chance to escape. He uses the tunnel to extract his old teacher's corpse and place it in his own bed, while Edmond takes on the role of the dead Italian priest in the body bag. The gravediggers arrive. They take the bag, thinking it is the body of the mad priest. Edmond makes himself as still as the dead. They take him out of the dungeon. Edmond expects them to bury him. It is a grim prospect, but he plans to dig himself out with a small knife, a tool Faria had made. But the gravediggers of the Chateau d'If do not actually dig. They throw. Over the side of a cliff, Edmond is tossed after a weight was tied to his bag. Down into the sea he goes. With the knife, he tries one last act of desperation to cut himself free of the weighted bag, and succeeds. Freedom is his as long as he can swim the stormy waters. He lands himself on a bit of rock, and witnesses a ship crash on that same rock. Not hesitating, he takes the clothes of one of the poor sailors and launches back into the sea on a chunk of debris. Out of energy and nearly out of life, Edmond is rescued by a smuggling ship. Claims to the ship's captain that he is the lone survivor of that horrific wreck. He asks the captain to take him on. In the near distance, cannons can be heard firing from the Chateau d'If. When the smuggler captain wonders what could be happening over there, Edmond tells him very straightforward that a prisoner has escaped. Edmond works for the captain for a while and quickly becomes a well-liked leader of the smugglers. Eventually, Edmond makes his way to the small island of Monte Cristo, where he discovers the hidden treasure of the Spada family. Edmond, under the alias of Abbe Busoni, tracks down Cataraus, who now runs a dilapidated inn. Busoni tells Cataraus that Edmond died in prison and left an expensive diamond to be split between the three men poor Edmond thought of as his friends, Danglars, Cataraus, and Ferdinand. Upon hearing this, the regretful but greedy Cataraus divulges that Danglars and Ferdinand were no friends of Edmond, and that it was they who framed the sailor. Danglars and Ferdinand, it seems, also did well for themselves, earning places in Paris high society. Cataraus admits he said nothing to stop the two villains, but that he truly liked Edmond. Busoni inquires what became of Mercedes and M. Morel. Mercedes married Ferdinand. They even had a son, little Albert, and M. Morel, who desperately tried to save Edmond from captivity, was very near bankruptcy after a few failed voyages and wrecked ships. Indeed, the Pharaon was all that was left of Morel's shipping fleet. Busoni awards Cataraus with the diamond and departs. This isn't the last we hear of Cataraus, though. M. Morel is indeed on the verge of bankruptcy. He awaits the return of the last ship in his fleet, the Pharaon, the same ship that Edmond sailed on many years ago. If the Pharaon meets an unexpected and unfortunate end, as did the rest of his ships, he won't be able to pay his debts on time, thus damaging his reputation beyond repair. To him, this is worse than death, and if the ship fails to arrive, he will take his own life. News reaches Marseilles that the Pharaon was lost at sea. The crew survived and made their way back, but Morel's hopes are dashed. His son in the military, Maximilian, tries to stop him from committing suicide, but Morel counters Max's arguments and even gets Max to want to die with him. Morel says that isn't necessary since there needs to be someone to carry the family name. Just before Morel is about to blow his brains out, his daughter comes rushing into his study with a mysterious letter from a certain Sinbad the sailor. The letter instructs everyone to go to the docks. They go, and there, like a dream, the Pharaon, completely intact. The letter also states that all of Morel's debts have been purchased. As Morel's family cheers and hugs, Morel himself looks around for his guardian angel. Perhaps he looks for the ghost of the man he was unable to save all those years ago. I think deep down Morel knew who saved him. Unrecognized by his past employer, Edmond watches the joy of that family and then sets off on his quest for vengeance. Over the next 10 years, under the guise of several aliases, Edmond plots his revenge. As the Count of Monte Cristo, he befriends the son of Ferdinand and Mercedes, Albert, by saving him from a band of Italian thieves who are actually loyal to the Count. Albert, a viscount and well known in Parisian society, invites the Count to Paris and promises to network him with everyone who is anybody in the capital of France. It is in Paris where the enemies of the Count reside. Danglars has become a baron and a successful banker. His daughter, Eugenie, is even due to wed the young Albert. Ferdinand is now Count de Morcerf after his successful military services in Spain and in Greece. And Villefort is now prosecutor for the king. Through Albert, the Count charms a handful of important French politicians, journalists and nobles, and their wives. His wealth, exoticness, intellect, and mystery seem to draw all to him. And accompanying him is the equally mysterious Haydée, a Greek slave whom the Count purchased after she and her mother were sold into slavery by Ferdinand, who betrayed her noble father. To get at Danglars, the Count manipulates the stock market to drain Danglars of his fortune. He pays off telegraph operators to pass on false information. Fake news! One of my favorite scenes in the book is a short chapter in which Monte Cristo visits an operator who maintains a garden outside his post. The old man is honest and not very ambitious. the hardest type of man to bribe. But eventually, the old operator agrees to pass on false news after the Count promises him a large garden and a job-free life. The Count also turns Danglars against Ferdinand by introducing the promising and wealthy Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti. Andrea is actually a rogue named Benedetto, a runaway who shared a cell in prison with none other than Cataraus, who killed his wife and a jeweler out of greed, and is actually the abandoned son of Villefort and Danglars' wife, Hermione Danglars. He's also the adopted son of Bertuccio, who is one of the Count's Corsican smuggler servants who resuscitated the discarded child shortly after his birth. The only reason Bertuccio found the half-dead baby was that he was following Villefort in an attempt to assassinate him because Villefort refused to bring justice to the wrongs committed against Bonapartists. There are a ton of twists and turns here, and sometimes it is difficult to follow all the characters. Every seemingly unimportant character actually plays some crucial part in the development of the plot. Danglars decides he wants to cancel the engagement of Eugenie to Albert and wed her to Andrea, or rather, Benedetto. The Count tips Danglars off as to some shady business Ferdinand was involved with in Janina. Since an engagement cannot be called off without good reason, Danglars looks into Ferdinand's history. Benedetto doesn't necessarily know all that is at play here, except that he has gone from low life to high class overnight and is being funded by the Count. He plays his part. Of course, his good friend Cataraus won't let Benedetto have all the spoils. He guilts Benedetto into giving him a humble piece of the income from the Count, and as Benedetto further explains the wealth of his mysterious benefactor, Cataraus gets it into his head to rob the Count. Naturally, Benedetto sends a warning to the Count of the planned robbery. No honor amongst thieves. Cataraus breaks into the Count's house, which he expects to be vacant, but Abbe Busoni, who gave Cataraus the diamond many years ago, is waiting for him. After Cataraus fails to kill Busoni, the Abbe blocks all routes of Cataraus' escape. Busoni makes a deal with the wayward tailor. Write a letter exposing Andre as the cutthroat Benedetto, and he may escape with his life. After writing the letter, Cataraus leaves the house and is immediately ambushed by Benedetto and dealt a fatal stab. With his last breath, Cataraus exposes his killer. Busoni, who came to be with Cataraus in his final moments, quietly reveals his own identity. Cataraus dies. Right before the wedding of Eugenie and Andrea, the police storm the party and let it known to all who Andrea really is. Benedetto sneaks out and escapes. Eventually, he is caught and taken to prison. Meanwhile, the details of Ferdinand's days in Greece are anonymously published in a newspaper. Danglars has the justification he needs to break off Eugenie's engagement to Albert and match her with Andrea. This is even more important to Danglars now because he has lost a fortune making bad calls in the stocks based on faulty information coming out of Spain. He needs to attach his family to someone exceedingly rich. Albert reads the accusations against his father in the paper. His pride is dealt a great blow. He traces the information back to Danglars, who confesses that it was the Count of Monte Cristo who has tipped him off. Albert is destroyed. He saw the Count as a mentor of sorts, and now he must challenge the man he invited to Paris to a duel to the death. The Count is by and large a much better shot than the young Albert, and he fully intends to kill the youthful noble. That is when Mercedes appears before the Count. She calls him by his real name, Edmond. She has known it was him since he first arrived in Paris, and she begs him not to kill her son. She reaches a place of empathy in the Count's heart, and he decides that he will allow Albert to kill him. Not wanting the lover of her past to be killed either, Mercedes reveals the truth to her son. Albert decides to backtrack on his challenge, a decision that condemns him socially, and he and his mother leave Paris for Marseilles. Albert then enlists in the army. With his reputation in tatters, Ferdinand challenges the Count, but the Count comes before him dressed as a sailor, dressed as Edmond Dantes. In complete shock, Ferdinand retreats to his mansion, where he shoots himself in the head. During all of this, things are not well in the house of Villefort. Villefort's daughter from his first marriage, Valentine, has fallen in love with Maximilien Morel. Valentine is locked in an arranged marriage to Baron France d'Epinay, the son of a royalist general who is killed in a duel by Noiter. France is also the spotlight character during he and Albert's escapades in Italy, where they met the Count of Monte Cristo for the first time. Valentine has no feelings for France and dreads the day she will be wed. She secretly meets with Max behind the Villefort family garden. Noiter has become completely paralyzed due to a brain aneurysm, yet he is still able to communicate via his eye expressions. Valentine is extremely close to her grandfather, and Villefort seems to express some affection towards his father, though they are still at odds philosophically. Promising to help Valentine get out of her arranged marriage, Noiter reveals to France that he killed his father. France calls the engagement off. Heloise, Villefort's second and current wife, is envious of Valentine because Valentine is entitled to all the family inheritance. Heloise and her son, Edouard, become acquainted with the Count of Monte Cristo after he rescues them from a potentially dangerous carriage accident. In her discussions with the Count, he informs her about several different potions and poisons, since she seems to be genuinely interested in such things. Suddenly, people connected to the Villefort family begin to die under mysterious circumstances. The family doctor realizes what it is right away and accuses Valentine of being the murderer. However, Valentine falls victim to the poisoner, though isn't killed. Max, not knowing who to turn to, goes to the Count of Monte Cristo, who has become a friend of his. He tells the Count everything, and so the Count goes to Valentine and gives her a special potion that will mimic death. As far as everyone knows, save the Count and Valentine, the daughter of Villefort is dead. This includes Max, who is beside himself with grief. The Count holds back on telling Max the truth, but gets Max to promise that he won't kill himself until a certain time. With the prime suspect dead, there's only one obvious choice: Heloise. Before attending the trial of Benedetto, Villefort confronts Heloise and demands that she poison herself, or else the full weight of the law will fall upon her. At the trial, Benedetto, who was told of his true family line by Bertuccio, tells all that he is actually the illegitimate son of Villefort and Hermione Danglars. Realizing that he himself is not above sin, Villefort dashes back to his mansion to stop Heloise from taking her own life, but he is too late. And to make matters worse, she also poisoned the young Edouard. The Count of Monte Cristo arrives to gloat before Villefort, but finding the young child also poisoned, rushes to try and save him. But he cannot bring the poor boy back to life. Villefort goes insane. Edmond wonders if perhaps his vengeance went too far. Danglars, now with a tainted reputation as well as in debt, decides to leave his family for Italy with a cash receipt. He is eventually captured by the same thieves who kidnapped Albert. In return for his freedom, Danglars forfeits all of his money save 50,000 francs and apologizes for all the wrongs he did towards Edmond. Edmond, having become more sympathetic after the death of Edouard, simply releases Danglars. The Count of Monte Cristo takes Max to the island of his namesake. There, Max is surprised to be reunited with a very much alive Valentine. Edmond says farewell and leaves with Haydée to start a new and happy life.
Alexander Dumas based The Count of Monte Cristo after a series of true events, though he took a lot of liberty. It was published in a serial through 1844 and was at one time the most popular work of literature in all of Europe. This was a long summary, to be sure. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Next time, I'll have a bit of a fantasy on the table for you. Nagash, the sorcerer. Oh yeah. Thanks for watching.